Hello, and welcome to this episode of Reaching and Equipping, a podcast whose aim is to empower every member of Christ Church to walk faithfully with Him and answer His call to go and make disciples. Today we'll be sitting down with Jason, the campus pastor at Northridge Seneca, talking about doing ministry without a seminary degree. Hello, Jason.
Hey.
Here we go. It's exciting. So first of all, does a person need to have a theological degree or have gone to seminary to do ministry?
No.
No.
Strong no.
Okay. Strong no.
Yes.
So before we start, just throwing it out, seminary is not bad.
No.
Seminary is good. Seminary trains pastors and people in the ministry to do ministry. We're not at all saying that seminary is bad. But there are lots of people, actually a majority of Christians in all of history, never went to seminary. And so I think it's an important conversation to have to talk through what it looks like to do ministry without a seminary degree.
Perfect.
That's it. So did you, Jason, go to seminary?
I did not.
Okay. You did not go to seminary, but you're a pastor.
Yes,
You're a
I've
pastor
been a
now.
pastor for 13 years.
Okay. So what did your ministry look like before becoming a pastor?
That's a great question because I was actually a beer salesman. I worked for Budweiser, and I had a heart for people to know Christ as a beer salesman, and just a spiritual discontentment about what my role was in the kingdom. And so I thought, you know what I do? I will share Christ with people that hang out in bars and liquor stores all day long, which I thought was a great idea. But not everybody thought that. So I would do my job, but when it came time to have small talk about the weather or the Chiefs or something, I would just move the conversation to more meaningful things. 5 times I was turned in from customers that their beer salesman, kept talking about Jesus. And so my bosses had to have conversations with me like, hey, I know you love Jesus, but you got to stop. And so that was what consumed me before I ever was where I'm at now.
Right. Did you come to believe before you had that job, or was that something that happened at the same time?
No, I became a believer at 18 years old, and I got that job around 23. We had moved towns, and I was working for Pepsi before that. And so I just thought, oh, here's a distributor.
Sure.
But their main product was Budweiser.
Yeah.
So I just went with it.
Yeah. One thing on that, we were talking recently about suffering for the gospel and how like Peter and John, they're before the religious leaders of the Jews in Acts 7, the second time that they're brought before them. And they say, we told you to stop preaching Jesus. You guys haven't. And then Peter and John are like, well, whether it's right in your eyes that we do what you say rather than God, like you decide. And then they beat Peter and John, throw them out of the synagogue, and it says they went out rejoicing because they were counted worthy to suffer for the name.
Wow.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So what do you think about that idea? Like you were turned in for preaching the gospel.
Yeah. It's what has your heart. And so I literally remember the conversation with my boss in the parking lot when he's like, you need to stop. And I said, I don't know if I could, even if I told you I would, because this gospel is real. And these people aren't going to step foot in a church. And he's like, you may need to find a different line of work. So he didn't truly fire me. But I understood that there's that's really what led me to say, maybe I'm supposed to do something else.
Yeah. So what's your story, journey to becoming a pastor, like entering into the position you are now?
That's great. So after those conversations, and it really was a season of like months, I was trying to hand out Bibles on my route and got turned in for that. But anyways, came back and I said, okay, I am going to sell everything, head to seminary. I don't know what I want to do. Just train me in the Bible and I'll trust God with the rest. And everybody in my life told me, you're making a dumb decision. And I could not wait to tell the church because I thought the church has my back. And I told the first person at church, Chris Geyer, and he's like, wait, don't go just yet. And I was so deflated. But he goes, we think we're going to plant a church in Seneca, and we think you're the guy for it. We'll train you everything you need to know, train you here in-house. I'll be over your discipleship, your teaching personally. We think you're the guy. And I took 2 weeks to fast and pray, to really ask God, like, this is crazy. I've never heard of anything like this. In my brain, you had to go to seminary before you could ever be a pastor. So anyways.
Do you remember what was going on? Like, did you express that? Did you express that you're like, this doesn't seem right? Like, is this
for sure
possible? What were their responses? Like, what encouragement did they give you that maybe like this is an acceptable path?
Charlie was the lead pastor here, and he said, you can go if you want to pave your own road, but we think you're the guy for this job. And if you think that you're called to these people, we're in. And he literally told me, he said, if you can see yourself doing anything else, any other job, any other occupation, go do it. Because ministry is going to be hard. You're going to go through times where you want to quit. You make the decision. So I took weeks to make that decision. And I have never heard the voice of God. and I was waiting for it. But ultimately, I just had to choose. And I said, all right, I've got kids already. My wife didn't really want to live in the city. She loves living in rural Kansas. And so I made the decision, and I don't regret it.
Okay, so what do you think is required to do ministry? If seminary is not required, if a theological degree isn't required, what is required to do ministry?
That's a good question, really good. Just boiling it back to the most basic thing for God to use a person is just a humble heart that knows and loves Christ. And so if you think about your own story and who led you to faith, were these trained pastors with MDivs and PhDs, or these Bible professors? They were mostly like moms, and just my friend led me to Christ. He was an ex-drug addict, and he was a senior in high school, and I'm like led to Christ by him. So the actual requirements to be used by God is a humble attitude that loves Christ.
Yeah, and the Holy Spirit. Like
1,000%.
Yeah, and the first time when Peter and John are brought before the Jews, not the time that they're beaten, the time before that where the Jews were a little bit more merciful to them, they said, we recognize that these are uneducated men.
Common men.
These are common men, but we see that they have been with Jesus. And the thing that they didn't know about those men was that they're also filled with the Holy Spirit. We see Peter, right after he receives the Holy Spirit, stand up at Pentecost and give this wild theological dissertation on who Jesus is and all of this theology, and he's just a fisherman. But he's a fisherman who has the Holy Spirit. And so I think being equipped with the gospel, having the Holy Spirit living inside you, and having a humility that says it's not me who's doing it, it's not me who gets the glory, but it's God. I think those are really the prerequisites to doing ministry in any capacity, whether you're preaching on a Sunday, whether you're leading a small group, whatever capacity it is, that's the prerequisite.
Yeah. I mean, even when it comes to like teaching, we want to be clear and we want to be accurate, rightly dividing the word of truth. But there have been times where I think I have just the perfect answer and God doesn't use it. And there's times where I just fumble my way around it, and I'm just trying to tell the person about how much I desire that they know Christ, and God uses that. And I just like tripping all over myself. And so John 3:7 is the most frustrating and freeing verse in the Bible. It says, the Spirit moves wherever it wills. You can't see where it's going or where it comes from. So it's frustrating that the harder and the more precise and better I do, doesn't make a difference, correlation in the kingdom impact. And then it's also freeing.
Yeah.
Like we are just called to be obedient, to follow Christ personally, and then to bring as many people along with us as we can. And John 10:26, sheep hear my voice and they follow me. So it's frustrating and freeing, but it's really cool to just even get to be a part in what God's doing in the world.
Yeah. It's so cool that the times where we just let go are often the times that God works the most. It's when we're at our weakest, at our most ignorant, that God shows his strength and his wisdom. I love that God does that. Are there any ways that your ministry has benefited from not going to seminary?
Yes, in a non-cool way.
Non-cool.
Yeah,
I like that.
Not flashy way, but the ways that my ministry has benefited is that it has kept me humble. Like for the first 5 to 8 years, people were constantly asking, we're trying to start a new church in a new town. Where did you go to seminary? And I have to humbly say, I didn't go. And they're like, oh, so you're not like a real pastor. And I'm just like, I want you to know Jesus. And I was trained by Chris Geyer, and he really did teach me what I would compare to a seminary level degree. And I ended up auditing courses online just because there's this humble attitude that I don't have it figured out. I need to continue learning. I didn't like knock out 3 years and go, okay, now I'm set. Now I think I got it ready. I have continued to just humbly ask wiser people around me for advice and continue to study and read as if I'd never went to seminary. And so here I am, like 39 years old, and I am more in love with Jesus now than when I first began.
Yeah. So not having received formal training has led to a more consistent, a more accessible humility within you. That's what I'm hearing you say. And then also led to a fervor and a desire to be in the Word, to be studying, to be preparing, because you didn't have this background or this foundation of a degree or having gone to formal training that you could rely on. And so that led you to be a continual learner and probably led you to just be more in love with God as you study and look at his word. And you mentioned two things. You said you were personally discipled by this guy, Chris Geyer, and you audited courses at a seminary. So could you just go into what both of those looked like?
Chris Geyer, smartest man I know, he uses words that I had to ask, like, what does that word mean? Because it's just such a brilliant guy. He finished valedictorian in his seminary from Midwestern. So he was incredible, and he would actually give me assignments and tell me that you got to read this book and you have to listen to this Al Mohler's The Briefing, and we're going to discuss it, and I want you to write down questions throughout the week, and we're going to talk about them. And that was years of that. And so it was such a sweet time. He would give me things to accomplish, and then I also just had a straight curiosity. What is seminary really like? So Master's Seminary out of California, they put all their classes online, and you can listen to all of them for free. And so I spent hours and hours and hours listening to the same classes that they teach their seminarians. I always respected John MacArthur. So that I went through all of those. Yeah.
That's so good. I love the fact that there's so much wisdom available within the church. Like where the Holy Spirit is, there's wisdom. And the fact that so much of your training and probably a lot more of your meaningful training happened in a discipleship context, like one-on-one meetings, learning from Chris's experience, learning from the things that he was sharing with you, learning from the resources that he was giving you, and then working through those with him. I think that's just beautiful.
And it was at the same time that we had launched a church. And so I was like, personally shepherding and caring and loving on people going through things in their life. I was preaching at the same time I am learning. And so I took a pastoral counseling class online at the same time that I'm actually in the ministry. So it was a good way to do it. I can't imagine trying to cram it all in and then going out. Mm-hmm. So it just worked out well.
And honestly, the rest of any pastor's time for the rest of however long their ministry is, they're learning alongside doing ministry. There's probably, in a good sense, this model of devoting yourself primarily to study for a time. But I think it would be a tragedy, or at least this is my thought or opinion, is that it would be a tragedy to not do any ministry while you're in seminary. Mm-hmm. And that happens. Like, I know that happens. I've had conversations with guys are going to seminary. They're taking classes. I'm asking them, how's it going? What are you learning? And they say things like, I just can't wait to get out to do ministry. Mm-hmm. And that's just devastating to me. Like, we're called to make disciples. We're called to be doing ministry. And I think that there's probably a balance in how to do that while you're in seminary. But I think it would be a tragedy if you spent 3 to 4 years of your life only studying and not ministering to mm-hmm. anyone.
Yeah. Or you hear, I've been studying the Bible all week at school, so I'm going to skip church.
Mm. Yeah.
Well, you're kind of missing the
point. They didn't
have
an ecclesiology class, yeah. Obviously.
Yeah.
They hadn't gotten to that course yet.
Yeah.
What advice would you give someone considering whether or not to attend a seminary or pursue a theological degree?
I would give them advice to go, to do that if that's in your cards.
Yeah.
And then soak it up. Have a humble mindset when you're out, that you spent 3 years studying the Word. You are only beginning to know this God. Don't have a arrogant attitude that thinks that you've got it figured out or that you know more than the older Christian who hasn't been to seminary. So stay humble. And then the second one would be that if it's not in your cards to go to seminary and you just work at like a beer factory,
yeah.
to not limit yourself to how God might be steering you, how he might use you, the people you interact with, and even teaching the Word to your coworkers and teaching it, like leading a small group or a Bible study. Don't sell yourself short. How about you? You're going to preach on Sunday, and you don't have a seminary degree.
It's true.
From what I hear, you're killing it. So that would be
by God's grace only, if that's the case. I wouldn't say I'm killing it, but
that would be my second thing: is do not think because I don't have this that somehow you're a lesser in the kingdom. That somehow you don't have the same opportunities that somebody that went through this program has. Just take risks.
Answer the call.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, we're both preaching Isaiah 6 this week. Isaiah is in the throne room. He recognizes the depth of his sin. He is then cleansed by God, by God's grace. And God says, who's going to go for us? And he says, here I am, send me. And we don't have any record of if Isaiah went to a seminary or went through any formal training. He's just a guy that was ready to answer the call of God on his life. Mm-hmm. And so I would say your call, my call, our call, the call of God is to answer him when he calls. Moses was 80 when he was called.
They got mad at Amos for his message. He's like, I'm just a shepherd, okay? I didn't even want to do this. I'm just doing what he told me to.
Yeah.
Yeah, just don't sell yourself short if you do not have seminary training.
Yeah, the Holy Spirit is a way better trainer than any...
He tends to use the
any
fools.
Professor.
Yes.
Yeah. And we were just... what is that? The book that we were just reading? 1 Thessalonians, where Paul says to them, you have no need of anyone to teach you about brotherly love.
Yes.
For the Lord's teaching you. Like, often it's the Holy Spirit who's the best teacher. Okay. Always, it's the Holy Spirit who's the best teacher.
Yeah, he lives my whole Christian life for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
great.
we all with unveiled face, beholding the glory of the Lord, are conformed into the same image, from one degree of glory to the next. This comes from the Lord, who is the Spirit. The Spirit's the one doing the work. And like what humility arises out of that, knowing that it's not me who's becoming more like Jesus. It's the Holy Spirit making me more like Jesus.
Yeah.
If it was up to me, I'd fall apart.
Yes. To quote John MacArthur, if I could do something to lose my salvation, I would have already done it. You can edit that out.
No, that's good. That's good. I'm so glad that God is faithful, that God is kind enough to keep me and continue loving me and be patient with me. And he'll be patient with you, listener, wherever you are. And our prayer is that you would answer the call, that you would be ready to answer whatever call God is making on your life. Because we're all called to ministry.
Yeah, start doing ministry where you're at.
Every Christian is called to make disciples.
It's a good word.
Anything else?
That sums it up.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And until next time, may each of us be making much of Christ by reaching and equipping the people in our lives for his glory.